Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Steve Bonham. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here today. How are you?
I'm very good. Over here in England, so you could catch us late in the day.
Yeah, I know. You say you're recovering from COVID, so you're sounding pretty awesome for someone getting over it. But I'm so happy you're recovering. But we're here to talk.
It's good. It's good. I'm a beneficiary of the vaccination program.
So did it come about because you had that and just getting mild symptoms?
No. It's just. But I would have it. I'd be much worse if I hadn't had it, I think.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, you're going to share how we can survive and thrive in an impossible world. And that is the name of your book, How to Survive and Thrive in an Impossible World. And it seems impossible the past couple of years. It's nutty, some of the things going down. But you've been a traveler, a storyteller, a published author, and you're going to share some of your wisdom today with our savvy audience. But share a little bit about your background that led you to write your book.
Okay, it's interesting because I've lived a kind of double life. If that's not too bad a thing to say. I mean, part of my background is a business psychologist, so working on leadership performance all over the world for 25 plus years. And I guess for those who are not aware, business psychologist is a bit like it's to business what a sports psychologist might be to a sports team. So I'm not really interested in people's mental health, but in their performance and their emotional well-being at work. So that kind of thing. But alongside that, I've always been a musician. You can probably just see the background, the odd guitar lying around. And I've also been a bit of a vagabond. I love trekking. I've done some beautiful treks through the United States. And this. With lockdown, we had in lockdown in the UK for most of last year, and then until actually, I just thought it's time for these two worlds to meet each other. What have I learned from being a musician and a writer and an explorer? And what have I learned from being a business psychologist working with large corporations? So it was just a nice opportunity to sit down and put that together.
Yeah. That's fascinating for me. That what was your favorite state when you were vagabonding across the U.S.? Okay,
I could be very careful here.
Well, they're all awesome. We all have our flavors.
Trekking through Georgia, North Carolina, the Appalachians.
Wow.
But the place that stunned me, and I must go back, is New Mexico.
Really? I've never been there yet. Wow.
I think one of the great misunderstandings of America, and I keep realizing how little people in the rest of the world understand the United States, is if you're dealing with a place which has got four distinct civilizations, four distinct cultures have moved across it in its history, and it's not the new world there; it's a very old world. It's
interesting. I never heard that perspective.
Indian, and they were there before the Apache, were there before the Spanish, there before before the Great Trail ended in Las Vegas and Santa Fe. So
wow, it's fascinating.
And a wonderful, mystical, multicultural place.
Well, my friend moved there recently. She's an artist. She's in Santa Fe. She said, if you're an artist, this is the place to come.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, and you can end up, as I did, sitting in a bar talking to this very old guy, and he turns out to be Billy the Kid's third cousin. So that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah. Well, being a traveler and a songwriter and an author, and then, having the past year to reflect and being a psychologist as well, what are some of the key points that pulled out that were, that you learned from the past year?
I think it's interesting. I think the biggest idea, and it really came from for traveling in the United States through the Appalachian Mountains, where a lot of settlers originally went, was this idea that we tend to see change things, between literally one state to another, one way of being to another way of being. And actually, there's a big borderlands to change, which is when you leave one place and you go to another. There's a period of passing through in which, those settlers would have brought a whole load of thinking from the past, a load of skills and materials, some of which would have been useful, and some of them which they quickly found that were not useful. So one of the big ideas is that when we go through change, one of our challenges is, what do I keep or what do I need to throw away? We tend to see, normally, all the sort of cheap textbooks and things, is changes, forget everything and start. And it's not like that. It's a mystery. What works and what doesn't work is one of the things you have to find out. And I love that idea. I love that.
I do
sort
too.
Of borderlands.
Yeah. And this past year for me, there's so many good things that came out of it. For one, I was going to the gym in New York. I lived in Brooklyn, New York, and I belonged to this boutique gym. It was a aqua gym. I love water. So when the whole COVID thing happened and we're forced to stay home, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to miss my aqua classes. I was so upset. But, I found new opportunities and people online to connect with, work out with, and new ways to work out and actually get more connected to my body than I'd been beforehand. That has actually led to me losing a lot more weight and getting fitter than I've ever been, working out from home and finding a community to connect with online. That wouldn't have happened had we not been having to make a change.
I think that's a really insightful thing. And I think, in some areas they call it the third eye. So, in one sense, you can look at, one level we look at others and see what others are doing and make a judgment. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we look at ourselves and say, I should be, I need to. But sometimes the third eye is we look down at us and the world and say, what is my place in it? And how is the world dealing with me? And how am I dealing with the world? And it's, I think lockdown, at its best, or that did give people a chance to have an aerial view of their life and what mattered. And it's interesting over here that the way there's a mystery about how people are going to treat work in future. What's clear is people aren't just going to go back to work, and as if that was an intermission in their lives, and now it's back to how it was. So I think a significant number of people are have paused for thought and thought, well, I don't really want to keep doing that. That's not that exciting.
Yeah. And I think companies and businesses will have to reflect, how are we going to go forward in the new work world? Because one thing I've heard from people is that they love the connection they've built with not only their friends and family, but their children, which over the years, if you're a two working family, with the husband and wife going to work, or, two couples going to work, you all were kind of separate from each other. And then now being stuck at home, at first there were times where it's really challenging. You're like, oh my gosh, I want to get away from you guys. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's been the relationship building, which a lot of people are saying, I don't want to give that up. I want to keep that and be able to do my job at the same time. So I think that's really true. And if you think about it, going to work is a relatively recent phenomena. Those settlers who came to the Appalachians, or dragged their livelihoods across the Midwest on wagons, didn't go out to work. They lived with their family, and the family were brought, and the children, and they had that relationship. So we're talking about a way of being which it's been quite amazing how it's become almost like seems to be a natural law, but actually it's at best 200 years old, and probably for most parts of the world is less than 100 years old. Yeah. And what's interesting? I think, Steve, in the past, I've reflected on this in before, that a lot of what our ancestors did was they were niche business owners. They didn't call themselves business owners. I farm and I, sell that farming goods, or I'm the tanner and I make, but they all had individual niches that they served in the community. And now we call them entrepreneurs or business owners. Yeah. But, because now, like you said, in the past 200 years, we had the Industrial Revolution. People went to JOBs and sat at desks, but that's so all new. It just really hasn't been around that long in human history.
But I remember, this may be an apocryphal story. Mm-hmm. I remember this lovely story when the first factories opened in the States.
Hmm.
On a Monday morning, people turned up to work there, and so they got through to sort of about halfway through the day, and someone said, "That's really interesting." Right, well, cheerio. I'll be back later. And and the whole idea of staying there and being in that role, in that a piece of the machinery was rather strange, to people. I'll come in on Thursday. I've got cows to milk.
Exactly. Exactly. And now people are beginning to realize this past year that there's other options. And business owners too, I find, and this is something that was a not good thing in the beginning, I find that some of my friends who had jobs or whatever, they would overwork because there was none of the cues to remind them, oh, go to the water cooler, get a coffee, or now it's 5 o'clock, go home, that type of thing. So they were kind of working like crazy hours in their pajamas and not really having good boundaries. Like, okay, now we stop, now we do other things. But it's now also led for people to decide, okay, I got to stop that. How do we add boundaries, even if I'm working in the same place as my home?
No, I think we're dealing with a very interesting time. We are in the borderlands of what work is and how do we live our lives. At one level, it's got far less security. I think the days when people would, leave school and go work for Chrysler or something, and they could pretty sure they'd be working for Chrysler for 30, 40 years. It might not be a great job.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my dog. They would they would they'd go to work for Chrysler, and then they think that's the end of it. But now there is no job security.
Yeah. And there hasn't been way before COVID, actually.
No,
but
it's been gone for a long time.
Yeah.
But the mythology of it is very pernicious. The mythology of the company and the employee, which is a bit of a master-servant relationship, that is very powerful, and that has lingered on, and very much so. And I think that that's still got a way to go in terms of people saying, well, actually, I don't really want to be a servant with my life,
Because you don't get that time back. You don't get it back. Now, Cher, why do you think it's become so intrinsic in the Western world that we hold on to this idea of security and the master-servant thing? Is it because we used to have a futile system in the past, or why do you think that's?
Well, it was a very good system. I mean, when Henry Ford, had Henry Ford sheep on Henry Ford farms, making Henry Ford seat covers to go in Henry Ford cars, on Henry Ford boats to sail across from Henry Ford's. All that was a big way of working, and you really didn't want people walking around saying, "I'd like to do it something like." It just didn't make any sense. So that 20th century was a very successful model for the time, and those technologies suited people working like that. I mean, what it was like for the people who did it is another question of clearly, but from an industrial sense, that was how mass production worked. We're in a sort of post mass production world now, where that part of the economy is going to be increasingly driven by artificial intelligence, and then what our role is as human beings in that is something that's being shaped around us. And back to Borderlands idea, what is it that we've done all so far that we need to keep as individuals, as teams, as businesses, as whole economies, and which of it do we need to let go of rather quickly? And again, if you think about the climate crisis, what is it that we've got to change? Because this global supply chains don't do much good for the environment. So how's that going to change the world and the way we work?
Yeah. Well, what's great about this time, and you were right, this time of the past year has been a great time for people to reflect. And I think the greatest wisdom on today's chat is really, what can we get rid of that's not working anymore, but what can we keep as far as our skills, talents, and gifts that we can add to the world and to the marketplace and to our lives to make it better, and to get rid of the stuff that doesn't work and add new things that do work. So
I think that's the one of the things, I say there's these 5 rules, and I hate the word rules, but I could never find a better word for it. Five pieces of advice sounded a bit wishy-washy, but 5 rules. One of them which is actually really understand your strengths and realize that they are the best thing to keep you thriving.
Yeah.
And we have lots of strengths we've yet to discover. And, the opportunity in the impossibility of the world is to say, I need to reinvent myself. I need to rediscover, almost regenerate what I'm capable of doing as a continual process through this Borderlands period.
That's true. Because as you push past uncomfortability, you begin to realize skills and talents you didn't even know you had. But I don't want us to leave without people finding out how they can get their very own copy of How to Survive and Thrive in an Impossible World. How do they do that?
They go on to the good business Amazon, which is probably the easiest way to get hold of it and order a copy. That is the simplest way of all.
Awesome.
Or they can go to our website, www.thevagabondphilosopher.com, and order themselves a copy. But Amazon's probably in the States the best way of doing it.
Probably. Well, I thank you so much, Steve Bonham.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Christina.
It has. I wish you all the best and your true absolute recovery to absolute wellness. And I thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming to Savvy Broadcasting today.
This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.